Hello, in this video, I'm going to explain the File API in Java. Let's create a project first. We'll call it as Using File API. We'll create a program also by creating a new class, program01. We'll add a main method and create a file variable. Now, this file needs to be imported from java.io, which we'll do by moving the mouse on that and selecting the import option. Now that we got this, if I select this and press F4, you will see that there is a file class, and that file class has many constructors and methods available for us. Now I'm only showing the public methods. So you can see that there is a constructor that takes a string argument, and that constructor we can supply a file name that either may exist or it may be created, or it may not even existing. So I can check here by saying file equals to new file of, for example, sample.txt. Now we can check if this file already exists or not. For example, we can check if file.isFile, or you can even check, is there anything called file or a directory called sample.txt? By checking if file.exists, then I can say that the file already exists. Or probably you can say that if it is not existing, give a message. So I'll give here else, I'll type no such file or directory with name equals to sample.txt. Now, when I execute this particular code, you will see that we get this message. So let's execute. And it says that no such file or directory with the name sample.txt. Now, even if it is existing, where do you think it will be looked in for? Because we just gave a file name, not the actual path. Now, the answer is it looks in the project folder. So if I go and create a file here called new file, and I'll call it as sample.txt. Now, if I execute this particular program, you will see that it says the file already exists. You can see that the file already exists. That's because it's trying to select from there. So there are many functions available in that to work with this. For example, we can check in Unix platform, can this particular file be executed? Is it executable? Now in Windows and Unix, both the platform, can I read that file or can I write that, or is it read only? Now we can also create a new file in case if that file does not exist, and if it will give an error if that particular file is not possible to be created. For example, imagine that there is already a file called sample.txt with a read-only attribute, then you will not be able to create that file. Or probably there is a directory with that name and you cannot create a file with the same name. Now, you also can check and say, hey, delete this file, and you can also say, hey, delete this when the JVM quits instead of deleting it right away. We can also check exist like we have done already here. We can get the actual complete path or a file representing that particular information. We can also get the information about the path. For example, right now I have just given sample.txt. If that file exists, where does it exist? If I want to give, I can give that here by saying probably path to the file is, and then I can type here file dot get absolute path. So when I execute, you can see that the file already exists and the path to file is d colon my Java workspace folder using the file API, that's a project folder, and inside that sample.txt. Now we also have some information about the drives. So the get free space and the get something like used, get total space, they will give you what is the size available on the disk where this particular file is available, that is in my D drive. So similarly, how much of the space I can use in that, and then you can also specify, is it a directory, is it a file, is it hidden, what is the length of the file, that is supposed to be the size of the file, and I can get the information about the files inside a directory if this happens to be a directory. We can also get the file objects representing each one of them and navigate that. We can also create a directory if that is a single directory name. However, if I given a path like a/b/c, I can make sure that all the directories get created if they don't exist. We can also rename a file, and we can also set the attributes of a file in this particular case. Now, let's see if I can work with some of these functionalities. For example, I want to print the information available in a specific directory, and I want to navigate through that directory and all its subdirectories. Let's go and try to do the same thing. So first, let's go and close this console. Let's delete all this. And we want to accept from the user, enter a directory that we want to navigate. So we'll just type here file. First, we'll get a scanner to accept from the user. Scanner sc equals to new scanner of system.in. That's the keyboard. And then I will ask the user enter a valid directory name. So I want to see if there is a file or a directory. If that's a directory, what exactly the content. I can probably create a file object by saying file equals to new file of that particular name. Let's call it as file name if the user has entered. So we'll say string file name equals to sc dot next line. So we have asked the user to enter a valid directory name. He's entered something, we stored it, and now we converted them to a file object. But not necessarily the user has entered a valid directory name. So I can check if file.is directory, then only I'm interested to do. Or probably I can say if not, it is a directory, then we will give a message and exit the code. So we'll say that input was not a valid directory name. And then I'll just say, okay, it's not a valid directory name, so let's go return from the main function. But if the user has entered a valid directory name, we got the directory, now we would like to get its contents. To get the content, I can use something like this. I can say file.list. Note that list returns an array of string. List files would return an array of file object. So I would like to use this function, and I will assign that to a variable called probably files. Now, since the files does not exist, I can ask Eclipse to create that by saying create a local variable called files, and note that it now creates an array of file objects. So this is one easy way of creating a variable for a given function called return type. Now that I can use a loop such as for each loop, and I'll say for file f in files. Let's go and check, is that particular file object that I'm looping through, is it a file or a directory? And we will print an information about the same thing. So we'll just type here that system.out.printf. We'll use a square bracket %s to say is it a directory or a file, and then we will also say what is its name, and then a new line. Now to print file or directory, we'll type f dot is directory, then we'll say dir, else we'll put a file as a kind of convention here. So we'll just print here file or directory, and then we will say what exactly is the second argument. The second argument could be f dot get absolute path, or simply I can say get name, just the name of the particular file. So I can now print this, and you will be able to see I get the contents list with files and directories mentioned for each one of them. So I'll type sc.close as a closing of resources for this. So it's just saying that we need to close this particular resource before returning it away. Now you can do that by saying sc.close to avoid that warning. Now when I execute this, it's going to ask me a valid directory name. Now I'm going to go give my directory, which is my workspace itself. So I'm going to execute this, and it's going to ask me enter a valid directory name. I will give d:/Java workspace, and when I press enter, you can see it is giving me a list of all the files and directories. And you can see that there is a directory called metadata, and all these are classes. All these are folders basically for my projects. And in case if I want to go and check that out, I can go to my D drive and Java workspace. As you can see, there are no files. However, if I select one of the directories, such as, for example, using or throwing exceptions, I copy this and then run my code and paste this path. Now I'm giving d colon java workspace slash throwing exceptions. When I execute this, you can see it says that dot class path is a file, dot project is a file, and dot settings, bin, and src are basically folders or dirs. Now that I can recursively go through each of these directories and access them too. Now, one last thing we will see about this directory or the file and directory is that we can create a directory if we want. For example, I'll say string path equals to d colon slash java workspace slash, I'll just type here a slash b slash c slash d. Now I can put a double slash here to avoid this error, or I can use a forward slash like Unix operating system format. One of those things should be followed. Now that I've used this particular path, I can ask File API to create a path for that. So I go back to my file class. I'll say file equals to new file of path, and then I can check path dot, you can say mk file dot mkdirs. Now the one with the plural creates all these folders if it is needed. Now note that this folder already exists, but A, B, C, D folders don't exist. So if I go back to my workspace, you can see there is no such folder called A, but by executing this code, you will see that there will be a directory called A gets created, inside that B, C, D gets created. So it did not give me any output because there is no print statements. But if I go and check here, there is a directory called A, inside that B, inside that C, and then there is a D directory. So this is how you will be able to use the File API for working with files and directories.